The moment the lawyer opened the folder, my heart dropped. Not because I was scared, no, I was tired. Tired of pretending to be okay. Tired of smiling while my son's wife paraded around the house like she owned it, like I was the guest. She crossed her arms, looked at me with that same smug grin she wore every time she undermined me. I sat at the far corner of the mahogany table, the same one I had polished for 20 years in this house. The lawyer cleared his throat and said, "Shall we begin?" Before I dive in, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. It really helps more people hear stories like this. My son's wife, Melissa, was already seated confidently at the front, with her red nails tapping against the wood, clearly rehearsing her victory speech in her head. She had a habit of wearing designer suits that screamed wealth, but I knew she had never earned a dollar of it. All that money, my husband's legacy, was built on our backs, on my sacrifices, on the nights I stayed up nursing him through his early business losses, on the hours I worked to keep the household running while he built the empire. And now Melissa was sitting like the queen of it all. "I think it's obvious who the estate goes to," she said before the lawyer could even begin. I looked over at my son, Daniel, my only child. He didn't meet my eyes. A week earlier, when James, my husband, passed away, I had been the one to call everyone. I was the one who arranged the service, selected the casket, even paid the church. Melissa didn't offer help, not once. But the second the burial was over, she began redecorating our home and whispering into Daniel's ears about protecting their share. 2 nights before the will reading, I overheard them arguing. She thinks it's hers. The company, the house, the assets. She has no legal claim. James never updated the documents after the restructure, Melissa hissed. Daniel didn't say much, just nodded. And that's when I knew. They thought I had nothing. They wanted me to have nothing. But they forgot something. James may not have updated the original documents, but he had written something else. Something Melissa didn't know existed. Back at the will reading, the lawyer opened the official folder and began with the formalities. Melissa didn't hide her impatience. "Let's just skip to the part where we take ownership," she said with a laugh, glancing at the rest of the room. Most of James's old friends were there, but they were silent. I could feel their pity. The lawyer ignored her and continued. "I'll now read the last testament and distribution plan filed by Mr. James Ellington 6 months ago." Melissa froze. 6 months? "Yes," he replied. "There was an updated filing, private, handwritten and later notarized. I was instructed to keep it confidential until his passing." Her face twitched. Daniel shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Then the lawyer began to read. "To my beloved wife, Catherine, who stood beside me through every storm, I leave the full controlling interest in Ellington Group Holdings, the home at Bay Ridge Hill, and all liquid and fixed assets under account Artemis." I heard Melissa gasp. "That must be a mistake," she said. The lawyer continued. "To my son, Daniel, I leave my love and encouragement, but I cannot leave my legacy in hands that do not yet understand its value. Should he wish to earn a place within the company, it must be done under the guidance and supervision of Catherine." And then the lawyer chuckled. "Excuse me," he said. "I'm sorry, but James wrote this next part in his own handwriting and asked me to read it exactly." He held up a single paper, scanned it, and then smiled. "Melissa, if you're in the room, I know you're already angry, and I know you tried to outsmart Catherine, but you never did your homework. You assumed that being loud meant being clever. I'm leaving you nothing." Gasps echoed across the room. Melissa stood up, her face turning crimson. "This is absurd. She must have forged it." The lawyer calmly closed the folder. "It's already been verified and executed. Transfers occurred the morning after his death, as per instruction. The trust has been sealed. Your husband, Mrs. Ellington," he said, turning to me, "was quite meticulous." I sat quietly. I didn't smile. I didn't speak. But inside my heart was pounding. They thought I was weak. They thought I was out. They thought I had lost everything. Melissa stormed out of the room. Daniel followed, silent, but I didn't get up right away. I sat there, looking at the chair James used to sit in during Sunday dinners. I imagined his voice whispering, "You always were the stronger one." Now the story will go back to the beginning, to how Melissa came into our lives, how she slowly turned my son against me, and what happened in the months leading to this explosive will reading. But you'll see, they should have never underestimated a wife who built her husband's empire from the ground up. And this is only the beginning. They met on a rainy Friday afternoon. Daniel had just returned from university, his first year in finance, and insisted on managing his father's portfolio to get real-world experience. James, always eager to bond with our son, agreed. That weekend, he brought Melissa to our house for dinner. She walked in wearing a fitted blazer, red lipstick, and heels too high for our wooden floors. The first thing she did was look me up and down. "Nice little house," she said. "It's vintage." I smiled politely. James didn't catch it. Daniel laughed nervously, brushing it off. But that was my first warning. Melissa wasn't here for love. She was here to acquire. Melissa made it her mission to impress James. She asked about the company, pretended to be fascinated by logistics, and even brought him books on mergers and acquisitions. James, bless his heart, thought she was simply ambitious. But I noticed she never asked me anything, never once offered to help with dinner, dishes, or even set the table. "She's just young," James would say. But no, she was strategic. Before I dive deeper, let me tell you this. She saw us as her next big investment. 3 months later, Daniel proposed. James was thrilled. I wasn't. Something in my gut twisted when she flashed that oversized ring around the dinner table, announcing, "Daniel picked it, but I told him to go bigger. I mean, legacy wives wear legacy diamonds, right?" James laughed. I stayed silent. During the wedding planning, Melissa took over. Every decision ran through her. My dress colour? She chose beige. The guest list? She cut out half of my cousins to make room for influencers. James didn't understand why I stopped smiling in family photos. "You're being difficult," Daniel told me. "Melissa's just trying to make things perfect." Perfect for whom? The night before their wedding, James and I sat in our bedroom. "She's not what you wanted for Daniel," he said. "No," I replied, "but she's what he chose. We'll stand beside him no matter what." He reached over, held my hand and said, "You always see things before I do." And I did. A year into their marriage, James fell ill. It started with small things, forgetting dates, mixing up meetings. Then came the hospital visits, the specialists, the tests. I became his full-time caretaker. Melissa? She started moving things into our bedroom. "It makes more sense for Daniel and I to stay here so we can help," she claimed. Help. She never brought water, never changed the sheets, never even asked how he was feeling. But she was very interested in the filing cabinet in James's office. I caught her there twice, flipping through folders, snapping photos. She didn't know I had already moved the important documents. One night, James was too weak to sit up. I read him the mail, fed him soup, and when he finally dozed off, I found Melissa in the study. Again. "This is private," I said. She turned slowly. "I'm just organising. When James goes, things will fall to Daniel. We don't want surprises." I wanted to scream. Instead, I said, "You forget whose name is still on everything." She smiled. "For now." 2 weeks later, James called me to his bedside. There's a notebook, blue leather, in the safe behind the grandfather clock. I found it that night. It was his handwritten letter, his real will, his instructions to the lawyer, his plan to protect me. He had seen what I saw, and he made sure she wouldn't win. But he didn't tell Daniel. "He needs to learn," James said. When he died, Melissa wore a black dress that was too tight for mourning and heels too high for a graveyard. At the burial, she cried for the cameras. When we got home, she handed me a box. "What's this?" I asked. "Your things. Daniel and I thought it'd be better if you stayed at the guest house." I stared at her. My husband isn't even cold yet. She rolled her eyes. You're being dramatic. That night I moved my things to the guest house, but I didn't touch the notebook. Not yet. I waited. The next few days, Melissa started redecorating, removed James's trophies, replaced our wedding photo with some modern art, and called in an appraiser. She was preparing to liquidate everything. That's when I called the lawyer. He had known James personally. We planned everything together, he told me. But she'll fight, I warned. He smiled. She can't fight a trust that's already been sealed. I spent the next few days silent. I watched as Melissa paraded through my home. I watched Daniel slowly stop speaking to me. I watched as she referred to herself as the new matriarch during brunch. And then the will reading happened. You already know what the lawyer read. You already know what she lost. But what you don't know is what I did next. Because Melissa wasn't done scheming, and Daniel wasn't as innocent as I thought. And the house? Let's just say, not everything was signed over the way they assumed. They wanted to test my strength. Now it was time for me to show them what I really built. The morning after the will reading, the house was silent. Melissa hadn't come down for breakfast. Daniel sat in the kitchen swirling his coffee without taking a sip. His face was pale, lost, embarrassed, and maybe for the first time, realizing the gravity of what he'd let happen. I stood by the sink, hands deep in the soapy water, scrubbing the same mug over and over. My wedding ring clinked against the ceramic. That same ring James had given me 39 years ago. It still meant something, even if no one else in this house seemed to care anymore. Daniel finally spoke. Why didn't you tell me, Mum? I turned, drying my hands slowly. Would you have listened? He looked away. I didn't know he updated the will, he added weakly. That's the thing, Daniel. You didn't want to know. You let her do all the talking, all the thinking, all the deciding, and now you're shocked at the result. He looked up, a flicker of defensiveness in his eyes. I thought you were okay with it. With being erased? He flinched. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't need to. My words carried more weight now than ever before. I built that empire with your father. I stayed up during the nights he thought it would collapse. I sold my jewellery to pay our first warehouse rent, and you two... I stopped. Not because I was out of breath, but because if I said everything I was thinking, I might never stop. That same afternoon, Melissa reappeared. Sunglasses on indoors, hair dishevelled, fury in every step. She marched to the living room where I was folding the throw blankets. You planned this, she snapped. You manipulated James while he was dying. I set the blanket down gently. He made that decision long before you started lurking around his office. Her hands were shaking. You think you've won, but Daniel and I still live here. He's still your son. You can't kick us out. I smiled. Melissa, I don't need to kick anyone out. The trust owns the house. It simply means if you're not on the agreement, you'll be treated like guests. Temporary guests. Her lips parted. I've already spoken to the trust manager. The guest wing is yours for now, 3 months to relocate. After that, well, I'd suggest looking into apartments within your budget. Her jaw dropped. 3 months? You can't be serious. I'm being generous. And I was. I could have asked the trust to revoke access immediately, but something in me wanted Daniel to wake up, to see what marrying for ambition cost him. Maybe if he lived in the shadows of what could have been, he'd realise the weight of his decisions. Melissa stormed out, but that wasn't the end, not even close. The next week, Daniel brought home a financial advisor, an old friend from university. I sat in the library while they discussed options and access. I just think there has to be a loophole, Daniel muttered. She can't hold the entire company without oversight. The advisor looked cautious. She's the trustee, Daniel. Your father made her the sole executor. Everything's airtight. But I'm his son. And legally you inherited nothing but his love and encouragement. Daniel's face darkened. That night he confronted me. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Watching us squirm? I blinked. No, but I am watching you learn. He slammed the door as he left. Over the next few days, Melissa began a quiet campaign, calling James's former partners, asking questions, sniffing around board members, digging into account statements. She thought she'd find a crack, a mistake, a signature out of place. What she didn't know was that I had prepared for this for months. While James was sick, we spent his lucid moments planning every move. He recorded videos. He signed duplicate copies. We hired 2 lawyers, not 1. He even added a clause to the trust. Anyone who tried to challenge it would forfeit any pending benefits. Melissa was walking into a trap. Every time she made a call, every time she threatened someone, I documented it. One day, I found her in the garden, on the phone with someone named Greg. "I don't care what the documents say," she hissed. "We deserve part of it. She's a washed-up housewife. This was supposed to be my empire." I didn't say anything. I just stepped out from behind the ivy-covered column and locked eyes with her. She dropped the phone. "You were spying? You were scheming." Her face twisted in rage. "I'll ruin you." I nodded. "Try." Because I wasn't afraid anymore. I had the house. I had the trust. I had the board. And most of all, I had nothing to lose. What came next, though, wasn't about property. It was about legacy. You see, James left behind one final surprise, something even I didn't know existed. And when I opened the envelope labelled "For Catherine," only after the storm, I found a truth that would shake the family again. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The envelope was thick, handwritten, sealed with James's personal wax stamp. I found it tucked behind the old family albums in the library, hidden so casually, yet so deliberately. "For Catherine, only after the storm." His words, his handwriting, the kind he only used for things that truly mattered. I held the envelope in my hands for hours before opening it. Part of me was afraid of what it might contain. Instructions? A confession? Another twist? But mostly, I was scared of how deeply James had planned for every possible betrayal. It meant he had known Melissa's true colours all along, and worse, he had known our son would do nothing to stop her. Finally, with trembling hands, I opened the seal and unfolded the letter. It wasn't just 1 page, it was 6. The first 2 were for me, full of love, apologies, and gratitude. He told me how much he admired my strength, how sorry he was for letting Melissa walk all over me those final months, how he regretted trusting Daniel to stand tall without me. And then, he wrote something I didn't expect. "There's one final card to play, Kathy, one they'll never see coming. If they push too far, use it." I turned the page. Attached to the letter was a printed document with transfer authorizations, property codes, and a quiet transaction I hadn't known about. A private island property in Belize. Purchased, titled, and transferred solely in my name. James had bought it the year Melissa and Daniel got married. In his words, "I knew you'd need peace someday, a place away from all this noise. But if things go south, this land is your leverage. Melissa's already tried to steal the crown. Let her think she's fighting for a house when she doesn't know the kingdom sits somewhere else." I read the line 3 times, then I sat back and smiled. James had always been strategic. This was masterful. They thought I was clinging to the estate. But the real wealth, the untouched, unregistered fortune, was off the grid. They could fight over the scraps. I had already won. 2 days later, Melissa invited her cousin Evan over. He was a slick corporate lawyer with a pocket square and a mouth that never stopped moving. I listened from the hallway as he pitched her ideas. "We can argue undue influence," he said. "Mental decline. You said he was on heavy meds at the time." She nodded eagerly. "Yes, lots of them. He was barely making sense. Except we had video, voice recordings, medical sign-offs from doctors. Melissa didn't know I had compiled everything. "You'll need Daniel to back your version," Evan warned. "Can he testify that James was incoherent?" She hesitated. "He's been weird lately. Quiet. Moody." Of course he was. He was starting to realize that choosing Melissa over his own mother had a cost. The next evening, Daniel came to me, alone. "I want to talk," he said. I motioned to the patio. We sat outside, under the string lights James had put up years ago. Daniel rubbed his hands together. "I messed up." I didn't reply. I didn't see who she really was. Still, I said nothing. I thought, maybe if I supported her, she'd change, that she'd grow into the role. I turned slowly. "And what role did you think she was growing into, Daniel? The role of my replacement?" He lowered his head. "She manipulated me," he said quietly, "and I let her. That was true." He looked up. "I want to fix this." I studied his face. There was guilt there, regret. But was it enough? "Then start by doing something she'd never expect," I said. "What?" "Tell the truth. To the lawyer, to the board, to everyone." His eyes widened. "If I do that, she'll leave me." "Then she was never with you in the first place." That night, Daniel disappeared into the guest wing. The next morning, I received a call from the estate lawyer. "Daniel just submitted a sworn statement," he said. He confirmed James's clarity of mind, backed the will, admitted to family tension but denied any claims of coercion. I sat quietly. "Also," the lawyer added, "he asked for your forgiveness." I didn't know what to feel, not yet, but something in my chest loosened. The storm was shifting. By afternoon, Melissa was gone. She left without saying a word. No bags, no farewell, just silence. But that silence didn't last long. 3 days later, I received a letter from a courthouse. Melissa was filing a civil case, claiming emotional abuse, unjust enrichment, and intentional exclusion. She still hadn't learned. I walked into my study, took out James's envelope and removed the final page. It was a contact card, a name, a private investigator. "If she tries anything," James had written, "call him. He knows everything." I dialed the number. He answered on the second ring. "I've been expecting you, Mrs. Ellington." That's when I knew James had set all of this in motion long before he passed. He hadn't just protected me. He had left behind a map, and now I was following it, one step at a time. The investigator's voice was calm, almost too calm. "Your husband had a feeling she'd try something desperate," he said. "He didn't trust her. He made that clear." I sat in my study, staring at the fire crackling low in the hearth. My fingers tightened around the phone. "He left specific instructions," the man continued, "and a file." "A file?" I asked. "Yes. Everything Melissa has done in the last 2 years, every account, every shady conversation, every late-night call to shell companies and off-the-record consultants. We've got bank transfers, audio clips, text threads, even video." My breath caught. "James asked you to gather all this?" "Not just gather," he said. "He paid in advance to ensure if anything happened to him, his legacy would be protected. He didn't want the company or you dragged through the mud." I swallowed. "So what do I do now?" "Let her sue," he said, almost casually. "Let her scream. Let her threaten. And when the time is right, we'll show the court who she really is." I hung up and sat still for several minutes. "James, you really did think of everything, didn't you? But even with the file, even with the investigator, this wasn't just a war over paper. This was a war over people, over trust, over betrayal, over the fact that I had raised a son who let this woman humiliate me in my own home." The next day, the doorbell rang. I expected a delivery, maybe the lawyer, but it was Daniel. He looked different, less polished, tired. He held a single envelope in his hands. "I moved out," he said. "She's gone." I didn't move. I didn't invite him in. "I signed over my shares," he added. "The 5% Dad left me indirectly through the holding firm. I put it back into the family trust." Now I blinked. "That was yours, Daniel." "I don't deserve it," he said. "Not after what I let happen." I studied him, the circles under his eyes, the brokenness in his voice. "Why are you really here?" I asked quietly. He hesitated, then held out the envelope. "I found this in Melissa's drawer. I think you need to see it." I took the envelope slowly and walked back into the study without inviting him in. He didn't follow me. Inside, I opened it carefully. It was a printed email thread. The recipient was someone I didn't recognize, a Michaela Winslow, listed as a senior officer at a luxury property group in Miami. The message was brief. "Confirming the purchase agreement for the Bayridge Hill estate. Once the title clears, I'll wire the balance. Let's close before her birthday. Daniel says she won't see it coming." The timestamp was 4 weeks before James died. I froze. She wasn't just scheming. She had planned to sell my home, behind my back, before James had even passed. My hands shook as I picked up the phone and called the investigator again. "I need to move quickly," I said. "I want everything on the record." "You'll have it tomorrow," he replied. As I hung up, a knock came to the door. Daniel again. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said. "Just a chance to prove I'm not like her." I paused. "Then earn it," I said softly. He nodded, his face falling. But he didn't argue. Later that evening, I met with the estate lawyer. We reviewed the court filing Melissa had submitted, full of venom. Claims that I had manipulated James, that I had poisoned his mind, that I had abused her emotionally by denying her marital equity. "She's really going for it," the lawyer muttered. I passed him the email I had found. He read it, lips tightening. "This changes everything," he said. "She tried to sell a property she didn't own." "Exactly," I said. "And I want the court to see it." He nodded. "But if I may suggest," he added, lowering his voice, "don't just fight her. Finish her." The words settled like steel in my chest. I had been protecting. Now I'd go on offense. The next day, Melissa showed up at the courthouse in head-to-toe black like she was auditioning for a courtroom drama. I wore navy blue, simple, unbothered. She saw me across the lobby and smirked. "Did you bring tissues?" I looked her straight in the eyes. "You should have brought a shovel. You're about to bury yourself." Her smile faded just a little. The doors opened. Court was called into session. And then it all began. Courtroom silence is a strange thing. It doesn't feel like peace. It feels like the moment before a thunderstorm. That thick air where everyone knows something big is about to happen, but no one's sure who it'll hit first. Melissa sat across from me with her lawyer, Evan, whispering in her ear like a snake. She looked calm, confident even. Her makeup was flawless. Her designer bag rested neatly beside her heels. She was performing. She always was. The judge entered, and we stood. The case was simple on the surface. Melissa, my daughter-in-law, claimed she had been unfairly left out of James's estate. She argued undue influence, mental incompetence, and even emotional abuse. All lies, all built on assumptions that no one would fight her back. But she didn't expect James to have prepared for this, and she definitely didn't expect me to be ready. Her lawyer began, painting me as a jealous widow who pushed a fragile young woman out of the picture to claim everything for myself. She was promised a future, he argued. She was told she'd help run the family empire. She gave up her career, her independence, to support Mr. Ellington in his final days. Then suddenly, without warning, she's excluded from everything. Doesn't that raise a question? The judge nodded slightly. Then it was our turn. My lawyer stood, calm and firm. We have evidence that Mrs. Melissa Ellington never supported James during his final days. In fact, she attempted to sell the family estate before his death, without legal rights and without Catherine's knowledge. He handed the judge the printed emails. Melissa's expression twitched. Furthermore, he continued, we have medical records confirming James Ellington was of sound mind when he updated his will and established the private trust. We have the original video footage of him reading the letter aloud, witnessed, dated, signed. He paused for effect. And lastly, Your Honour, we have a sworn affidavit from Daniel Ellington, James's only son, confirming that his father acted alone, with full mental clarity, and that Catherine never influenced him. The courtroom stirred. Melissa's jaw dropped. She turned sharply toward Daniel, who sat behind me. He wouldn't look at her. The judge reviewed the file in silence. After several tense minutes, he looked up. Mrs. Ellington, I must ask, did you attempt to transfer or sell any properties belonging to the estate prior to legal ownership? Melissa blinked. I was preparing. We were all grieving. I was trying to handle logistics. You were preparing to sell a property you did not own, he said flatly. That's a criminal offence. Her lawyer jumped up. Your Honour, she was misled. Enough. The gavel came down. This court finds that the last will and trust established by James Ellington is valid and legally binding. There is no evidence of coercion or mental incapacity. All claims against Catherine Ellington are hereby dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, the court is referring this case for civil review of attempted fraud relating to the unauthorised sale of estate property. The room exploded in whispers. Melissa froze. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just turned, gathered my bag, and walked out with quiet dignity, exactly how James would have wanted. Outside the courtroom, Daniel approached me. I meant what I said, he murmured. I'm going to earn back your trust. I didn't hug him, but I nodded. That was enough for now. Over the next few months, the estate stabilised, the trust grew stronger. I stepped in as the interim board chair, and surprisingly, the staff welcomed me. They remembered the woman who helped James in the early years, who packed lunches, organised invoices by hand, answered calls when James collapsed from exhaustion. And now I was back. Not out of revenge, but to protect what we built. Melissa's lawsuit didn't just fail, it backfired. She was investigated. She was fined. She lost every favour she had left. And Daniel? He started showing up at the office, quietly, humbly. He asked questions, took notes, and listened. Not just to me, but to the janitor, the receptionist, the delivery drivers. He finally realised what legacy meant. And as for me? I visited the island James left me, once. It was beautiful, still untouched. I stood on the sand barefoot reading his final note again. In case it ever gets too loud, this is your silence. But I didn't stay there, because my silence wasn't needed anymore. I returned home, to the estate Melissa once tried to own, and hosted my granddaughter's birthday in the same garden Melissa once sneered at. Balloons hung from the trees, children laughed. The scent of lemon cake filled the air. Daniel came up to me at the end of the party. You did all this without raising your voice, he said. I smiled. Sometimes the quietest one at the table is the one who owns the table. And I did. They said I was out of the 50 metres. But I wasn't just in it. I was it.